Welcome, everyone, to the Media Row podcast with me, Justin Miller, where we focus on the Missouri Valley Conference, everything Drake, basketball, football, softball here coming up soon, golf even we'll talk about, anything sports we'll talk about, but also entertainment, anything happening in the world. We try to talk about everything as a one-man show as much as I can, but really appreciate you guys hopping on for our Wednesday edition of the Media Row podcast. A lot to get to today with Drake taking on UIC, the men looking for revenge. And then also we're going to talk about kind of Katie Dinnebier's historic run she's having in her senior year. So we'll talk about that as well. Make sure to click the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Like, comment, all that good stuff. Make sure to rate us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get podcasts. You can check out Media Row, as well as follow us on social media. So thank you again so much for hopping on with us today. Before we jump in to the Drake game and Katie Dinnebier and all that stuff, some housekeeping that we need to do. So if you may have noticed, tomorrow or yesterday didn't put out a show. And I was going to put out a tweet, but I figured it'd be easier to just explain it on the podcast. And we are going to move this podcast to doing Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the show because, one, it is just easier. But two, I'm doing this for free. I got to find, as an unemployed guy, I got to, keep looking for a job and try to find something that I'm passionate about. And I plan to keep this going even when I get a job because I am really passionate about Drake and I love covering Drake. And it's something I've always wanted to do. But, it's getting to that point where got to try to find something to pay some of the bills. So hopefully you understand. I'm sure you do because a lot of people have been very generous and helping me out. But really appreciate all the feedback I've gotten with this podcast and appreciate Travis and Ross having me on and everyone just being so supportive throughout this whole transition period. But wanted to give you a heads up, starting this week, we're going to start going Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the show. Hopefully, it continues to be the level of excitement, the level of, research that I do. I put a lot of work into this, so I hope you still enjoy it, even though it won't be 5 days a week. But appreciate everyone joining us today. We'll jump into the Drake game tonight. I'll be there, so as always, Twitter will be locked and loaded with kind of thoughts throughout the UIC game, coaches' interviews as well afterwards. But just wanted to kind of talk about what this game means now for Drake. They're only one game ahead of UNI and Bradley after that loss to Bradley. And UIC may not be a threatening or a dominant team. They're still threatening because they beat Drake when Drake was undefeated earlier this year. But in every team in the Valley, with just the style of play, of offensive play that Drake has, they don't really blow anyone out. So you can't overlook anyone. You can't chalk a W for really anyone. Even though right now Drake is a 10.5 point favorite, that feels, whenever it gets over 9.5, I feel like that's high for Drake. And I said that against Murray State. They ended up winning, I think, by 13. They won over 10. So they're capable of doing it, but watching the games, they never feel, even they could be up 13. And it doesn't feel like they're up 13. And Drake fans know what I'm saying. And people that have watched this team know what I'm saying there. And it's not a knock on McCollum. It's just the style of play. And it works. They're winning. They're in contention to win their first regular season title since 2008. They're in first place in their conference. They have an opportunity to go to the NCAA tournament if they just keep doing what they can do and playing to their best ability. But they take on UIC, 6:30 p.m. tonight at the Knapp Center. You can check it out on ESPN Plus as well. Drake had their 11-game win streak snapped on Sunday against Bradley, but it's one of those, I remember being on with Travis and Ross, and they were asking of, is moving forward, is there a loss that Drake fans are okay with? And I said, really, it's UNI and Bradley. If you have to lose a game in these final 4, or at the time it'd be the final 5 games, I said it would be Bradley or UNI. That fans, I think, would be like, okay, depending on how they lost, and how they lost on Sunday is very close. They were in it till the end. You sit there and you go, okay, we had an opportunity to win. Some shots just didn't fall down, and it just didn't go Drake's way. I think fans, it sucks, but you're not terribly upset about it. Losing to UIC would be a loss that you kind of sit there and you go, okay, what's going on now? I mean, with 4 games left in the regular season, this is not a time where you need to start scratching your head. And I don't think that'll happen. And that loss to Bradley, Drake has done a really solid job of bouncing back after losses. They lost to UIC, and then they lost to Murray State earlier in the year. Then we didn't see them lose for a long time. I mean, 11 games straight that McCollum had this team playing, and they were playing some really solid basketball. And so Drake, since that time they lost to the Flames on the road, it's been a different Drake team, as it should be. I mean, every team in the country is a lot different from January 1st to right now, February, 18th, 19th? February 19th. Every team changes. And whether that's purposeful, like Drake is, adjusting the depth, adjusting the bench, adjusting the role players, or, sometimes you get put in a bad situation where you have injuries pop up and you have to adjust that way. Either way, every team has to change and adapt from the start of conference play to right now in the home stretch. But while Drake has adapted and has gone on 11-game winning streak, or leading the Missouri Valley Conference, UIC, since they've beat Drake, have kind of been on a roller coaster. 7-8 in conference play. They have size, but their offense is kind of okay, middle of the pack. They're 6th in field goal percentage, 7th in three-point percentage, 4th most in turnovers, which I star. Every time I'm previewing a team that Drake is playing, you look at the turnovers, because that's where Drake's bread and butter is their defensive end. And if Drake can force turnovers, it usually means good things for the Bulldogs. And I know that's some really in-depth, projection and, previewing right there on Media Row. But you watch this Drake team, if they can force turnovers, it starts just changing the momentum so drastically. I think there's only a handful of other teams I'd put in that category where, it's not a three-pointer that puts them, changes the momentum and changes the mentality of the team. Sometimes it can be a Mitch 3, but for the most part, they get their drive, they kind of get their vibe back when on the defensive end. And in the last 6, UIC has been real pitiful. Have won one game in the last 6, and like we mentioned, Drake has adjusted. They've recharged that depth. If you go back to January 1st against UIC on the road, it was Bennett Sturtz who put up, I think that time was his career high of 31 or 30 points, and Cam Mania, and that was it. And we all were talking about, man, this is going to be a tough, long conference season if they can't get help. That turned around. After that Murray State game, once you saw Isaiah Howard go off like how he did against Murray State, it changed the whole dynamic for this team. Tavion Banks against Bradley showed off what he can do. We're seeing what Cale Combs is doing. Against Bradley, he was huge off the bench. 13 points off the bench for Cale Combs, or he had 11 of the team's 13 bench points. So Cale Combs has been incredible. And so I think UIC, a team that, it was a battle to beat the Bulldogs when Drake didn't have really much of a depth and much of a bench to come in and help. It is going to be even a tougher battle now that Drake has a confident Isaiah Howard, has a confident Tavion Banks, has a confident Cale Combs to come in. And that on top, with the size, Nate Ferguson and his veteranship is going to be crucial today with his size going up against the taller UIC Flames. So Drake, to win this game would be huge. Not only just because you're bouncing off a tough loss to your rival in Bradley, but it is not an easy week for the Bulldogs. You're at home against UIC, then Sunday you hit the road to play UNI, who is right now the best team in the Missouri Valley in terms of how many games they've won in a row. Because UNI has won 5 straight, leading the conference, and that team is going to battle Drake. I mean, Jacobson is a fantastic coach. He knows what to do. And this UNI team, we've said it all year long on this show, this is what they do best. They kind of just continue to creep up the standings. They may not be dominant. Right now, they're looking really dominant. But for the most part of the year, they weren't a dominant team. And Jacobson just continues to grind out, continues to slowly. I picture him as like someone, chipping away on a statue. Like, he is just slowly taking it piece by piece, and it may not be perfect all at once, but slowly but surely the pieces come together, and you take a step back and you go, holy cow, look at this team. And he does it every year for UNI. So Drake taking on UIC tonight, the keys are usual for Drake. Get turnovers, get role players involved, and again, just rebounding will be huge with the size advantage that UIC has. So really excited about this one. The 10.5, I mean, I still want to say it's going to be lower, but I don't have a lot of confidence in this UIC team. I really don't. I think it could be close for the most part, and then halfway through the second half, maybe Drake kind of starts to pull away. But overall, I think Drake wins this game, and it becomes, now a battle for first place at Cedar Falls. So as we race forward to Arch Madness and St. Louis, you can no longer have head-scratching losses. And I think if Drake lost to UIC tonight, that would be one fans and people who have covered this team, they would sit back and you'd scratch your head wondering what is happening with only 4 or whatever regular season games left. I don't see that happening. McCollum's too good of a coach. This is too good of a team that has so much experience as well. And this team has proven that they can bounce back after losses. UIC is a good team, will present some challenges with their size, but overall, give me the Bulldogs. Give me Drake at home, pissed off after a loss to Bradley, and in their style, dominating. And that's not saying they're winning by 15 or more, but in their way, they are going to win a comfortable game against UIC and get ready for a potential battle for first place against their arch rival in Cedar Falls against UNI on Sunday at 2 o'clock. So going to be a really fun game. Still, regardless, Drake can't overlook anyone. And the Valley is one of the toughest conferences and balanced, I should say, right now. And it is just a fun finish to the regular season right now. Drake UIC 6:30 on ESPN Plus. As always, make sure to follow along with me and Media Row on Twitter for all game updates and coaches interviews at the end. Also put it out on Facebook and Instagram as well. I'll put out, usually coaches' opening thoughts after the game. So Drake UIC tonight, but before we wrap up today's show, I want to talk and give kudos to just the finish Katie Dinnebier is having to her career at Drake. It is not hyperbole. Drake will retire number 10. Like I would put so much money. If I had money, I'd put money on it. That Drake would retire Dinnebier's number at some point. She is just too good. An outstanding human being. Also off the court, fans love her. The whole team is easy to cheer for, but she is the glue. She is the leader, and she continues to get credit for it. And so Katie Dinnebier is having a historic season. Second time this season she's been awarded or named along the National Players of the Week. Last week, she averaged 31.5 points per game, help from her career game against Belmont, where she put up a career high of 42 points, 7.5 assists per game, 5.5 rebounds, 2 steals, shot 57% from the field, 48% from beyond the arc, and was awarded Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Week. And at this point, I saw my buddy J.D. Snover put this out on Twitter, and he is 100% right. At this point, like, it's more of a shock if she doesn't get the Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Week. She is an outstanding player, and really, at this point in the season, the only other player who could rival her for Missouri Valley Player of the Year, I think, is Caitlin Young over at Murray State. But really, right now, if it's up to me, give me Katie, who is putting up historic numbers to finish out her career at Drake. She has been incredible, and this women's team has been incredible. And as I always say, go out and support Drake women's basketball because they're easy to cheer for. Allison Pullman has built a culture of winning with this Drake team, and it's fun basketball to watch. They're fast-paced. They're an offensive-minded team, so it's fun to watch them on the offensive side. They're really strong on defense too, but man, when you have players like Katie Dinnebier, Ava Hawthorne, Abby Alsma, players that can just change the game with a couple of shots, it's a really fun offense to watch. The Drake women at home, they take on Southern Illinois tomorrow at home. So going to be a fun one to finish out the week for the Drake women. They also play on Saturday at home as well against Missouri State, which could be a battle for first place in the Missouri Valley Conference. So busy week for the Drake basketball teams. Drake men need to get through UIC tonight. Then you take on your in-state rival in UNI on Sunday. Drake women get prepared to play SIU tomorrow. And then on Saturday, go up against the number one team in the Missouri Valley Conference, a team that you nearly beat on the road, but a lucky shot forces overtime, and then the Bears just took over at overtime. But a fun show today. Talked about UIC, previewed that game for tonight, as well as gave kudos to Katie Dinnebier, who may not only win Missouri Valley Player of the Year, but she's leading the country in points per game. She could make some noise around the nation at the end of the year. So huge shout out to everyone following along. Thank you to Travis and Ross for earlier having me on this week. We will see you on Friday. Yes, Friday at 2 o'clock to wrap up this week on Media Row with Justin Miller. Follow us on social media, as well as give us a like on and a listen and a download on wherever you get your podcast. So see you on Friday at 2 o'clock.